continually serve and be a slave.
Hey, slide to the side, crack, I'll explain it. Crew of heathens making food and waiting the Jews. What a blessing. Roasted lamb, mac and cheese, well blended indeed. But what a dressing. Mashiach trumps loud.
You can read, if you can for me, just read. You can read 19 through 20.
This is Matthew chapter 5, verse 19 and 20. Therefore, whoever relaxes one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven.
So, if your righteousness doesn't exceed that of the scribes and Pharisees, you'll never enter into the kingdom of heaven. And what's being highlighted within verses 19 through 20 is that there are three categories, right? And this is something I never really thought about until rather recently. But there are three categories that are listed here within these verses. It makes mention, of one group that breaks the least of the law and teaches others that the law isn't authoritative. And we kind of know, who that group is. And there's another that teach the law and do some of it, and we're going to go into that, but they omit important aspects, and this will deal with the scribes and Pharisees, because, we see that, they keep some of the law, but they omit, very important aspects of the law. And then we see the third group, which is, them that keep the commandments and teach others to do so. So they're not just saying, but they're actually doing, and they're doing it in an adequate form. And that's the particular group, that last group that I mentioned. They're the ones that will inherit the kingdom. So out of these three groups, which ones are you? Are you the ones that teach and teach people not to keep the law and you break it yourself? Are you the scribes and Pharisees? You keep some of it, but you omit the weightier matters, you neglect to do it, but you're at least teaching people to do it? Or are you, actually keeping the law yourself and teaching others to do the same? You have to examine yourself and look at which one you are. And just real quick, just to back up or give a scriptural proof, let's jump to the book of Matthew. Chapter 23.
That's right, Sister Shay.
Right.
No pressure. Ain't no pressure. Hey, you Pharisees, they love to call Israelites Pharisees.
Right.
The scriptures say, I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. And he also said, hey, listen to what the Pharisees tell you to do and do it. Just don't be like them and do what they do.
Oh my goodness. That's the scripture I got pulled up. See that?
Oh, all praises. In the spirit, man.
God, man. Hey, but yeah, like a lot of people, they knock on the Pharisees and the scribes, but they not even reaching their level. Like, at least they was keeping some commandments and teaching others, hey, you got to keep the commandments. But y'all be like, hey, the law's done away with. The law's been abolished. Have you read 2 Corinthians, brother? Have you read Galatians? Like, that's what y'all are saying to us. So, who's worse? Y'all that are saying don't keep the law at all, or the people that's saying, hey, keep the law, but they just hypocrites, right? For lack of better term, they just hypocritical with it. Like they're both off. And that's both parties are not adequate in the Most High's eyes, but neither one could really talk about the other, especially the people that ain't keeping nothing. But if you can for me, King, read Matthew chapter 23 and start at verse 1. You read on down to 3.
This is Matthew chapter 23, verse 1, starting at verse 1 through 3. Then Jesus said to the crowds and his disciples, the scribes and the Pharisees sit on Moses' seat. So do and observe what they tell you, but not the works they do, for they preach, but do not practice.
God. So Christ is saying that the Pharisees and scribes sit in Moses' seat, meaning they play the role of the teachers and interpreters of the law within Israel during this time. And he says to obey what they're saying, but don't do the things that they do because they don't practice what they preach. That's essentially what he's explaining. So that's a plain saying. That's not veiled language or dark speech or anything like that. That's just clear. Hey, obey what they're teaching you as far as the law is concerned. They're teaching you, hey, keep the Shabbat. Don't break the dietary law. All of these things. Hey, those things are correct. Obey after that, but don't do what they're doing in their lives, right? So if you can for me, just read. I'm gonna jump on down to verses 4 through 5.
So this is verse 4 and verse 5 in chapter 23 of Matthew. They tie up heavy burdens, hard to bear, and lay them on people's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to move them with their finger. They do all their deeds to be seen by others, for they make their phylacteries broad and their fringes long.
So hey, they wearing fringes, and that's part of the commandments. So they got y'all that say the law is done away with and don't want to keep it. They got y'all there because at least they got their fringes on, right?
Right.
But right here we see that the Messiah, he's critiquing them, for laying heavy burdens on the people while refusing to lift a finger to help ease them, right? And when you go into this particular word for burden, it refers to a load or cargo when you look at the Greek language. And in this particular context, these burdens can refer to, or they can be understood in two ways, right? They could be explained and fulfilled in two ways because, as we read in the scriptures, it says that wisdom is manifold. But historically, we could see this happening in at least two ways, right? So the first way would be understood as, how the Pharisees, they would often place additional requirements, which were understood as fences around Torah. And if you're not familiar with that terminology as far as fences around Torah, that's dealing with, extra biblical traditions that are imposed, as their law, right? As it's Torah, right? So again, imagine somebody, telling you, well, hold on, brother, you gotta, you can't eat pork, right? Leviticus 11:7, it tells you not to consume the swine. So they say, matter of fact, brother, if you go inside the grocery store, you can't even go into the meat aisle because I don't even want you to go near and buy any pork and eat it.
Right.
Like that would be like a fence around Torah. And the reasoning would be, just to try to keep you from not breaking the commandment, but that's actually not in the law. And so what would happen is it would actually become a quote unquote burden to people because it's like, bro, the Most High didn't say you had to do all of that. And
So I'm
so,
gonna get my food from.
right, God, but we see like biblical examples of this as well with the ritual hand washing in Mark 7 and Matthew 15. When they were exactly that's a good point, Sis Wendy. As far as adding to the law, right? That was a great point. But we see in Mark 7 and Matthew 15, they come up to Yahushua and they say, hey, why are your disciples transgressing the tradition of the elders? And it's, we kind of see some of that today with certain people. Like they'll try to press you on something and they'll say, yo, that's off. Like even with the and this is a tad bit different because this is from a Pauline epistle, but they'll I seen a brother say, he put on a hat and he said, y'all brothers out here doing this. You know, he put a hat on. He said, "That's wicked, man." And I'm like, I'm looking at it. I'm like, bro, like you can't say that that's wicked or like that's sin or that's against the Most High. Like that's not even. First off, and the brother he did a beautiful lesson 4 months ago on head coverings, right? And
Man, you been that long?
yeah, 4 months ago, because I went and sent it to somebody yesterday, so that's why I just knew off top. But the brother he did a very exhaustive lesson on this, and he went into the history and things like that, and even showed how someone just putting on like an Amiri snapback or whatever, that's not talking about, or that's not what Paul was talking about when he said that. But even if you feel like, hey, that's what the scripture is talking, or that's what that passage is talking about, it's not in the Torah, and the Messiah didn't say it.
Right.
So you can't enforce it and say, well, hold on, brother, you got to do this, because hey, you don't want to sin, right? You don't want to go off, so you got to do this, or you can't do this. But it's like, brother, like what you're doing is you're trying to, impose a tradition on me that goes beyond what the Torah requires, and that's all. And so the Messiah, he would have rightly said, hey, as far as them teaching the Torah itself, teaching the things that are within there, like, hey, keep the Sabbath and all of these things, that's fine, but don't do the things that they're doing. And so what they would do is they would do extra things. And even as we mentioned, or even as we've seen in verse 5, it deals with phylacteries. And there's an understanding behind that, which even touches on they had a tradition that you had to wrap the commandments around your hand and place a box on your head and all of these things. But when you go back to Torah, it actually doesn't spell it out in that manner, whether you read in Exodus, I believe it's 13, or whether you read it in Deuteronomy 6. So I just wanted to make that point. But there's a second application as well. But before I go to the second one, you got any points, King?
Most definitely. I always got this point when I hear this scripture, Matthew 23:4. It always made me think about James chapter 2. Uh, so give me James 2, and it's start with verse 14 and read through 16.
Gone. 14 through 16.
Yes, sir.
Gone. This is the book of James, chapter 2, verse 14. What doth it profit, my brethren, though a man say he hath faith and have not works? Can faith save him? If a brother or sister be naked and destitute of daily food, and one of you say unto them, depart in peace, be ye warmed and filled, notwithstanding ye give them not those things which are needful to the body, what doth it profit?
Con. So just like it was speaking of these Pharisees, they're binding people with heavy burdens and not even helping to lift them. So one thing about when you start teaching someone this truth, you don't want to just try to overload them with all the laws that you know yourself. When you came into the truth, it wasn't overnight. You were still doing things while you were learning what you weren't supposed to do. So you got to have that same grace with your people, and you can't try to force everything on them. And you say, "Hey, you got to wear fringes. You need to have some fringes on." You don't know this person's money situation. You don't know what they got going on in their life, whether they can even get a ride to go and buy the fabric and do it themselves, or if they know anybody that does fringes. You haven't done anything to try and help this person actually keep the law. So you're binding them with heavy burdens and not even giving them the tools that they need to help them be successful. And that's actually a part of the walk also, loving your brother and your sister as yourself. So if we know that, yeah, our people should be keeping the commandments and they're able to even listen to you and understand it and say, yeah, I get what you're saying. And I believe that. And I understand what you're saying. And I want to do that. But you say, oh, that's okay. Well, do it. But you don't give them any tools to help substantiate their walk, to help them further their walk and in their faith. We're doing wrong in that aspect. That's why when we look at this verse, it says in verse 16, and one of you say unto them, depart in peace, be ye warmed and filled. Notwithstanding, ye gave them not those things which are needful to the body, what doth it profit? And in verse 15, Salaki, I should have read that. It says, if a brother or sister be naked and destitute of daily food. We're going to even say they ain't even got to be completely naked, y'all. You can be out here in 20-degree weather, right? And you driving down the street and you see a brother or sister walking and they ain't got no jacket on. And you got this big heavy coat on. And you got another heavy coat in the back seat. And you stop and you say, hey, man, what you doing walking out here like that? It's 20 degrees, man. You ain't got no jacket on. Well, I don't have the money to afford a new jacket. And you got a jacket back there. You got plenty more jackets at home. And you don't give this person this jacket. And you tell them, well, man, take care of yourself, man. Get somewhere. Go be warm. This is exactly what the Pharisees was doing. So we got to make sure we're not being like those Pharisees. And that we do what they taught. They taught to keep the law. But we're not supposed to follow the example that they set. But yeah, you got it.
Hey, that's a wonderful point, man. All praise to the Most High. That's why I put in the comments, boom, because that's a perfect explanation. And just to, as an aside, just to kind of speak to that, one of the main issues with the Pharisees and scribes was not necessarily what they were teaching as far as, hey, keep the law and things like that, right? Their issue wasn't that they wear fringes and fringes might be long or whatever. That wasn't their issue. Look at the crux of the issue. It was a life application. That's a way that they added to the burdens, by making things unnecessarily difficult for the people. Now,
cold-hearted. Yeah, the cracker got a cap, but we gon' do the do. 100 band foreign car, we ain't rooted poo. Of y'all young, we keep a case, dog, Scooby-Doo. See a coon, slap a coon, I went 2 for 2. Yeah, y'all color, but y'all squares, 2 a Rubik's Cube.